I was definitely a struggling student back in high school, studying day in and day out, but was still getting C's, D's and even F's on my report card. But how did this all change, and I ended up ranking top 10% of my medical school, studying only 2 hours a day and having a lot of free time to spend with my friends and enjoy my hobbies, and sparing the time to help thousands of students with their own studies. Hi, my name is Hugo. I'm a study performance coach, a doctor and pharmacist based in Auckland, New Zealand, where we explore essential study and learning skills that school have forgotten to teach us. So in this video, I'm going to share my top study efficiency tips so you too can improve your grades and achieve much more in less time. And to make it a little more interesting, I'm going to break down and compare why I was so inefficient when I was in high school as compared to my medical school studies. Now this was an evolution of 15 years of my own study as a high school student to 5 years undergraduate in pharmacy and 5 years in postgraduate medical school. So the number one difference is the study mindset. So back in high school, my mindset was completely different. It was mainly because of one systematic error in the way that I was thinking. And this was very dangerous because the way that I was thinking then translated to the choices that I would make, then all the actions that followed these choices, and then these translated to real life consequences. I defaulted to this fixed mindset, which basically put a massive limitation on my own abilities and beliefs, which then led to disappointing results in school. Now, fixed mindset is very dangerous because we adopt this external locus of control where we think everything is not our fault and everyone else is to blame, as opposed to taking responsibility ourselves. I'll take an example of taking a test in school. When I get bad grades and my exam paper comes back to me with a disappointing grade, then I would immediately start to complain about the paper, condemn that teacher who set these hard questions, and I would criticize everything that was unfair on my situation. Now this is dangerous because if I was spending all this time blaming everyone else apart from myself, I would never have the time to look within and see what is within my control and what I can change in terms of how I can learn better, how I can improve my knowledge, and how I can deliver this knowledge when it comes to the exams. Now all that complaining and blaming then translated to very inefficient study preparation and techniques, which I'll cover in difference number 2. So when I was in medical school, achieving those top 10% grades while having heaps of free time to do all the things I like. The main difference in my study mindset was that over these 15 years of study, over hundreds and hundreds of personal development books I consumed, this finally adopted into a concept of a growth mindset. Now this was an absolute game changer because everything that I see or think, I'd adopt this internal locus of control, meaning I'd take absolute responsibility and blame everything on myself when things don't go right. Now this sounds like a very harsh concept to begin with, especially when you begin to adopt this mindset. How can absolutely everything be my own fault? And isn't there injustice in this world at all? But the more you actually adopt this internal locus of control, the more power you actually realize you're regaining, much like Thanos collecting all of his Infinity Stones in the Avengers. And the beautiful thing is, when I started to actually blame everything on myself, I started to actually plan all the contingencies on what could absolutely go wrong. For example, with the preparation of an assignment. And instead of just blindly writing everything from scratch and actually just hoping for the best, I'll actually be researching much deeper, and I'll be looking at the marking scheme, reverse engineer the marks in each single section, and actually break this down into sections into the amount of words I should be covering in each on every single one of these sections. And on top of that, I would try to find out who would be the marking lecturers, and also try to find the past students who have done successfully in the same assignment and compare those who haven't done really well. And this actually allowed me to take all the desirable elements, even including the sentence structure, the style of writing, the length of sentences and the paragraphs, and actually infuse this into my own assignment. And when each of these assignments get marked, I'll do another analysis to see what I can improve much further next time, and actually asking the markers and lecturers for feedback, so I'll become even more flawless in my next assignment or exam. Now this slight change of thinking in terms of growth mindset actually compounded over time, and I hope you can see how powerful this is when you ironically start to blame everything on yourself. The number 2 difference is study preparation and study techniques. So the number 2 difference, and why I was so inefficient in high school. Now this is how I achieved top 10% of my medical school, only studying 2 hours and having a lot of free time to watch Black Mirror and Modern Family. So the efficiency in high school can be summarized using the study efficiency curve, which I always harp on about, and I've covered this in another detailed video called the 7 study habits of highly ineffective students. But essentially, there's this 30-minute warm-up zone where we'll achieve only a small amount of productivity. If we were able to push past this and actually get into a productivity zone, or some people call it the flow state, for the next 1 to 1.5 hours, we were able to achieve 2 to 3 times more productive work than usual. This is where we want to be staying as long as possible. And then as your focus starts to wane and you get into this burnout zone where your productivity dips dramatically as you continue to get distracted, you're tired, essentially get burnt out from this study session. This is where you actually need to take a break and recharge so you can actually start this curve all over again to reach this flow state. And of course, in high school, I didn't understand this curve, so I'll be constantly in these 2 inefficient zones, which is the warm-up zone and the burnout zone. Every time I would start to sit down and try to study, I'll study for 5 minutes, take out my phone, scroll Instagram, and actually lose my chain of thought, so actually nothing ever actually gets done. So at the end of the study session, repeatedly being in this warm-up zone, I feel defeated because looking back all day, I struggle to see what I've studied or what I've actually done during this day-long study session at all. And having a lack of preparation, sometimes when it's close to exam and I need to force myself to study 6 to 8 hours a day in one sitting, means that I'm living in this constant burnout zone. And my mind was muddled and fuzzy, but I still keep on pushing myself to sit at that seat and continue to struggle because I thought this was the right thing to do. So I end up being tired and frustrated again because after these 6 to 8 hours studying all day, I found out that I actually achieved not much but being distracted and yet feeling another day of defeat. So in medical school, my study efficiency greatly increased because I started to understand the concept of productivity zone or the flow state. Every time I sit down and study, I'll make sure I'll be free of distractions, put my phone away in another room, sometimes even switching off the internet if I don't need it. So through a lot of training, I'm able to reach my productivity zone or flow state much quicker and get the necessary work done and get out of that library. And often I see a lot of other medical students hanging out in the library for 6 to 8 hours in a day, but I'll see them highly inefficient because they're just forcing themselves to be there just because we all think working hard equates to efficient work. We'll then often compare exam scores and mine will often be 10 to 20% higher than them, which they then attribute that I'm just smarter, so I don't have to work as hard as they do. And I wish I would actually tell them I was in the same situation when I was in high school, and I'm glad that I've gradually evolved to studying more efficiently rather than just working hard blindly. This brings us to number 3 difference, which is our memorization techniques. When you think about it, what actually are exams? An exam is essentially taking a set curriculum and learning objectives derived from this curriculum, then setting these into exam questions. We're then required to recall information from our brain and put that onto a piece of exam paper in the form of correct keywords and phrases and sentences. So if we're not able to have an efficient way to retain and recall information from our brain, we'll still do very badly in our exams. So back in high school, when I was very inefficient because I wasn't able to make all of this exam content stick to my brain, I'd unconsciously adopt the most inefficient study methods and memorization methods. I'll be rote learning, copying information over and over again, or chanting over and over again until I beat my brain into submission. Only to find that a few short hours later or the next day, I've almost forgotten completely all of this information. Now this means that all of the time that I've actually been sitting there for hours on end copying and chanting have gone to waste. And no matter how many hours I study, I'm still scoring very badly in my exams because I was so inefficient in terms of getting information to stick to my brain. I also spend a bulk of my time highlighting and rereading my textbooks, which again have scientifically been proven these are very bad study methods, and I've covered this in much more detail in a video linked here about ranking the best study methods there is out there. And the other big inefficiency that I've been doing was that I spent a lot of time trying to make these beautiful notes, but I didn't realize that all this time I was making these notes is the time that I actually haven't been spending time to make this information stick to my brain so that I can actually recall this in the exam. So despite studying 6 to 8 hours a day, my study methods would be highly inefficient, and probably only 30 minutes to an hour of this study session would actually be useful. And as you can see, I've been working very hard but actually never translated to good results back in high school. So what has changed in medical school? Now, isn't the content supposed to be 5 to 10 times more than a lot of other undergraduate degrees? And how is it even possible to just study 2 hours a day and still get top 10% marks amongst these very smart students? So the significant change in my study efficiency was modeling the high achievers that came before me. I tried to reach out to them and ask them how they would actually study, and eventually I found a common point of efficiency amongst them. Oh yes, they still do spend some time making notes and tidying everything up and putting everything in one place so that they can refer to at a later point, but they would actually spend the majority of the time actually trying to consume all these notes and actually continue testing and applying these knowledges themselves. They will also be spending a lot of time forming deep understanding of the material rather than just rote learning, and a lot of time they would actually use this method of teaching, sometimes your colleagues or sometimes even pretending to teach themselves, because this is the fastest way that we can actually identify knowledge gaps and what doesn't make sense in the material we just have learned. And again, I've covered this in much more detail in a video on ranking the best study methods there is out there. So I started to take all of these high efficiency tips on board, and I started to do the same, shifting my attention from majority of the time making these beautiful notes to actually try to test myself and form these deep understanding. For example, using the 5-10-15 rule I devised so I can actually explain these complex concepts simply without any jargon to a 5-year-old, to a 10-year-old, then to a 15-year-old so that they could understand very well. And last but not the least, which is difference number 4 about exam techniques. So back in high school, I had no idea on how to develop a study plan to tackle my exams. So when exam time comes, I'll be scrambling in chaos and panic, so I spend even more time worrying that I would do badly in the exam. And the more I do that, the more I get distracted and the more inefficient I am with each study session as the exam time approaches. I would have no idea how well I know each topic, and I didn't even know that subject scoping or these course curriculums even existed. So the teacher can be teaching us one thing, and I wouldn't even be able to know whether they have gone off a tangent or whether this is core exam material at all. And I'll be studying chronologically in order, top to bottom, ineffectively spending my time covering topics that I already know very well and not spending enough time to cover the things that I had a huge knowledge gap in. So when I was in medical school, being much more efficient and able to free time to develop online programs to help thousands of other students, the main difference in my exam technique was that I developed and adopted the knowledge-based timetable, which I've also covered in much more detail in this ultimate guide to study planning. Now essentially, being able to describe the subject and know what exactly is going to be in the exam, then systematically trying to test myself objectively how well I already know these learning objectives. And then once I have this at a glance, I would know what knowledge I had big knowledge gaps in, which these are coded red, and then what knowledge I had some knowledge in, which is coded orange, and what knowledge I already know very well, which is coded green. Then with this crystal clear study planning using the knowledge-based timetable, I'm able to focus efficiently my time on these red knowledge and then turning all of this orange knowledge to green. And having turned all of this learning objective into green knowledge, this has now maximized my chance in the exam and I've used my time very efficient. So we know that just knowing the knowledge isn't enough, so I've developed a much more detailed program covering all of these areas in detail. If you want me to personally keep you accountable through our accountability program and join our amazing high achieving community to help you achieve those grades you want and regain your free time so you can do whatever you like without feeling guilty, please check our website Study Smarter Academy below, and I hope this video has been helpful for you and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.